makes this track special isn't its obscure name, but rather that it was built to be the hardest Trackmania track ever created. Igntool, who made the track, designed it as a digital trial by fire for Trackmania players who wanted to challenge themselves to the next level. In order to complete Oach, you have to make your way past 18 tough checkpoints, each with their own precise jumps and big obstacles, and all of them are near inhuman difficulty. If that doesn't sound like a track you want to play, then yeah, safe to say you are in the majority. Oach is one of the most daunting tracks in the game, and when it was released in 2011, many were quick to declare it as outright impossible. But if there's one thing history has taught us, time and time again, it's that you should never underestimate the determination of Trackmania speedrunners, because they will prove you wrong. Over the last decade, a small group of highly skilled drivers have been on a mission to conquer it. And not only have they finished the track, they've completely and utterly destroyed it. Welcome to the world record history of Trackmania's hardest track. On the 10th of October 2011, Igntool released his new track, Oachkatzlschwoafs on Ice, to the world. A trial track unlike anything anyone had seen before. The comments from the first days show that nobody could even pass the first checkpoint on the track, which required doing a full speed jump across the water, landing sideways on the grass, and then doing a powerful bug slide into a quarter pipe, so that the car would soar across the stadium and land up on a tiny ledge. From there, you'd have to drive on a very narrow double rail, gather all the possible speed, and do a precise series of jumps into checkpoint 2. And that was just the first of 18 similarly difficult parts. To most players, attempting to finish Oach seemed just a little too extreme, and almost everyone gave up immediately. Everyone except for just 2 players. Oachkatzlschwoafs, a Korean player who specialized at obstacle maps, and Tortugo, a Czech player who loved pushing the boundaries in Trackmania. Nowadays, Tortugo is best known as Kajumi, an influencer on TikTok with hundreds of thousands of followers. But back then, he was just a kid enjoying Trackmania in his free time. Tortugo and Oachkatzlschwoafs were great friends in the game, but also big rivals, and they often pushed each other to new heights. And since they both wanted to conquer Oach, the race was on to become the first to complete it. Just 9 days after the track was released, Tortugo became the first player to successfully get past checkpoint 1. From checkpoint 2, the only way of progressing further is to jump onto a blue wall and then turn around on top of it. This maneuver might look scary, but top Trackmania trial players can almost do this with their eyes closed. Once on the wall, he had to gather all the speed he could and jump onto a double rail ledge to reach checkpoint 3. Checkpoint 3 would be a struggle for Tortugo, as the crux of this segment is a pipe-to-pipe drop-down, where you need to maintain perfect speed to clear the gap between them. And once you land, you need lightning-quick reflexes to stabilize the car, else you'll fall right off. After that, checkpoint 4 is one of the more trivial parts, consisting of a few wall jumps, and it didn't take him too long to get past it.
I'm down to give it a look. Thanks, brother.
But on checkpoint 5, he was met with a very difficult jump. Here you had to perfectly aim a jump into a gap just a few pixels wider than the car itself. If your aim was just slightly off, you wouldn't have enough speed to make it to the following platform. And if you happened to make it to the other side, you still weren't out of the waters, because following that, you had to transition onto a double rail, use all the available space to build up speed, and do the final drop into checkpoint 6. This checkpoint took Tortugo many attempts to clear, but eventually he got past that as well. Just based on the number of checkpoints, Tortugo had beaten 1/3 of the map in a few hours. But the worst was yet to come, because Igntool had made the checkpoints progressively more and more difficult. The further Tortugo got, the more it dawned on him how far he still had left to go. That day, Tortugo found himself passing checkpoint 7, a full-speed wall ride segment. He also got past checkpoint 8, a tough precision checkpoint where you have to drive in between poles, checkpoint 9, which contained more precise blue wall jumps, and the wicked checkpoint 10, where you have to do a wallbang backflip onto a blue wall. Tortugo got past all of it seemingly without struggling too much, but as he entered checkpoint 11, he was now faced with the most difficult section on the entire map, that Trackmania players call the wall. This checkpoint starts off with many small precise transitions, where any minor mistake will cause you to reset. After that, you go on to a long blue wall, where you have to go at full speed and perform a huge jump to barely make it to a platform. And once on the other side, you again have to gather as much speed as you can, and then you are faced with the wall. A unique jump which requires you to commit at full speed with no hesitation, jumping onto a wall. And once on it, you have to stabilize the car and slow it down to a stop before it falls off. It goes without saying that this is absurdly difficult, and checkpoint 11 gave Tortugo a lot of problems. Despite his best efforts, he simply couldn't get past it, and he was forced to give up his attempt. Checkpoint 11 out of 18 reached, 61% completed.
Man, that's
Although Tortugo's first run wasn't successful, very few things that are worthwhile happen in one attempt, and it often takes many failures if you want to reach a goal. Tortugo knew he had it within him to become the first person to beat the track, so 5 days later, he went for another attempt. He was forced to start all the way from the beginning again, but for Tortugo that wasn't too much of an issue, as he quickly made work of the early checkpoints, and soon enough, he was right back where he left off, at the wall. This time, he was determined to try until he made it. History, and though the next checkpoints weren't much easier, he was at least past the worst of it. On checkpoint 12, he had to jump onto a tilted blue wall and perform another turnaround, as he was forced to drive backwards to make the car climb over this small ledge. After that, checkpoint 13 had more narrow transitions and jumps, and both segments took him several hours each. Checkpoint 14 is one of the most visually stunning on Oach, and it truly showcases the level of car control needed to beat the track. Here you have to gather speed from a quarter pipe, followed by an incredibly precise jump combination onto a curved wall, where you need the utmost precision to avoid falling off. But once you land on it, a mixture of relief and terror hits you, as all that remains is an easy but somewhat failable jump to reach the next checkpoint. That day, Tortugo made it to checkpoint 15, and he now only had 3 checkpoints left to go. However, the run was taking him so long that he eventually had to take a break to go to sleep, before continuing the next day. Once he got back on his PC, he slowly picked up the progress again. He managed to beat checkpoint 15, a segment characterized by drop-downs onto pipes, and then checkpoint 16, which had a massive jump onto a blue wall landing, where most of the time the car will slide right off, and then checkpoint 17, which had a very tough jump onto a pipe landing. After a lot of struggling and over 30 hours in total, Tortugo found himself on the final checkpoint of Oach, where the main difficulty was dropping from a box and landing directly on a single rail and keeping the car balanced. Once he got past that and made it to the quarter pipe, the finish line was in sight in the distance. He just had to get his car on top of the long double rail, gather as much speed as possible, and drive straight down to the finish. On the 24th of October 2011, Tortugo became the first player to complete Oach, with a final time of 30 hours, 31 minutes, and 20 seconds. The first completion of Oach was seen as a grand accomplishment in the community,
Wirtual video,
and it truly was,
that is about to get
but
destroyed.
This was only the beginning. Tortugo's rival Nicole was equally interested in beating the track himself, And a few months later, in February of 2012, he finally beat Oach as well. But importantly, his final time was faster than Tortugo's, finishing in 23 hours and 53 minutes. And he stated that if he didn't go to sleep in the middle of the run, he could maybe do a time of 13 hours. This might not seem like your typical track to try to speedrun, but Tortugo didn't like that his record was beaten, and especially not by his closest rival. So Tortugo wanted to speedrun it again for a faster time. Most people might think, why would anyone bother doing that? And in Tortugo's case, the reason was quite simple. He knew he could go faster, and it wouldn't take him long to prove it. In March of 2012, Tortugo went for his second run on the track, and only a few swift hours later, he reached the finish line for the second time, with an astonishing 6 hours and 6 minutes, 18 hours faster than Oachkatzlschwoafs. And after setting that time, he still felt he could beat it even faster, so he drove it again. In the autumn of 2012, Tortugo reached the wall at a blistering pace, making it to checkpoint 11 in just 40 minutes. And on that same run, he got past the wall in just 16 minutes. Tortugo was about to decimate the record, but unfortunately, on checkpoint 14, he got stuck for almost an hour. But apart from that hiccup, he was beating each checkpoint in around 15 minutes on average, even for the difficult segments late in the track. And he beat the world record by a mile, 3 hours and 11 minutes. This was a power statement from Tortugo. He'd cut the world record time in half, and when Oachkatzlschwoafs saw this, he gave up on trying to go faster. This seemed like it would be the end of Oach speedruns, as only a handful of players were even able to complete the track at the time, but none of them had any interest in trying to beat Tortugo. By the community, Oach was seen as a track that only experts could beat. So a few months later, when an unknown player called Nixion showed up on the forums and claimed to have reached checkpoint 12 in just 3 hours, nobody believed him. What's even more preposterous is that he claimed to have taken only 15 minutes to pass the wall. And if that was true, he could be a serious contender to beat the world record. But none of the top trial players had heard of him before, and they immediately doubted his claims. Lucky for Nixion, there was one reputable player who vouched for his legitimacy. A player who was also trying to beat the track at the same time, Simo900. Both Simo and Nixion were playing Oach on the same online server, and Simo had seen Nixion's skill level firsthand, and what he was saying on the forums was true. This guy was good. Both of them eventually managed to beat the map, and over the course of the next weeks, they steadily improved their records. Tortugo could sense that his record was about to be beaten, and in March of 2013, he drove the track one more time. That day, managing to complete Oach in 2 hours and 33 minutes. When commenting about this run, Tortugo said that hopefully this time is really unbeatable. But by now, it should be clear that Trackmania players love the idea of achieving the impossible. Stating that something in the game is unbeatable only paints a target that others will aim for.
True, eh?
And Simo and Nixion were just as determined to keep going. Nixion played the track on and off for the next year, until April of 2014, when he finally beat the unbeatable time from Tortugo by nearly half an hour, crossing the line at 2 hours and 6 minutes. In the span of just 2 years, he'd gone from being an unknown player making ridiculous claims to crushing the Oach world record. But how much further could players really push the record now? Well, in 2012, a segmented run of the track was made, which showed that if you did every checkpoint first try, you could technically do a time of 16 minutes and 30 seconds. But that would be ridiculous. This was one of the hardest Trackmania tracks, and obviously you can't expect to pass checkpoints on your first attempts. Or could you? You see, late in 2014, a great player showed up who wanted to take Oach to the next level. Welcome to the era of Drunk. In late 2014, Drunk would totally dominate Oachkatzlschwoafs on ice. steadily bringing the record down from Nixion's 2:06 all the way down to a 1:18. What set Drunk apart from other players was his incredible consistency. He often wouldn't go for the fastest strategies on each checkpoint, but in turn, he often didn't fail in the critical moments. On the 17th of January 2015, Drunk got past the wall with a new fastest time ever, 22 minutes at checkpoint 12. He was way ahead of the world record with less than half the map remaining, and though he was nervous, he managed to stay focused and seize the opportunity, finishing at a 59:24.
Wow, sub an
the
hour.
First ever sub 1 hour on Oach. No one else in the track's history had beaten it in under 2 hours, and Drunk had just done it in less than 1. He was on another level compared to everyone else, and still he wasn't done playing it. On the 4th of May 2015, he went for another attempt. After reaching the second checkpoint in a little over a minute, he also made quick work of checkpoint 3 and 4. Drunk reached checkpoint 5 in just 7 minutes, and then he spent 4 minutes trying the tight gap jump at checkpoint 5, but once past that, Drunk was going faster and faster. Checkpoint 6 took him less than a minute, and checkpoint 7 he simply did on his very first try. Checkpoint 8 and 9 took him 1.5 minutes each, and checkpoint 10, the wallbang flip, took him just 28 seconds. Drunk arrived at checkpoint 11 in 16 minutes, a new fastest start ever. And if he now landed on the wall in a reasonable amount of attempts, this run had the potential to become legendary. But in that moment, Drunk didn't need a reasonable amount of attempts, because in his very unreasonable first try at the wall, he did this. For the first time ever, Drunk one-shot checkpoint 11, taking just 56 seconds on a segment he usually needed several minutes for. Drunk knew this was the chance he had waited for. The pressure though was immense, and he made some unfortunate mistakes, like failing at the last jump of checkpoint 12, costing him 2 minutes. On checkpoint 13, he got stuck for another 4 minutes as well. His lead had almost diminished, but once he made it to checkpoint 14, he somehow managed to do the curved blue wall jump on his second try. And with this, he gained almost 20 minutes against the record. Drunk was well on his way to decimate his personal best, and he kept clearing checkpoints fast. He arrived at the last checkpoint at 38 minutes. He balanced across to the quarter pipe, jumped up to the double rail, backed up for speed, and drove down the rail highway to the finish. 39:39. A huge world record improvement. Drunk had clutched and one-shot many of the key checkpoints on the track, and with this, he marked his retirement from the grind, and left behind a very tough benchmark for other players to beat. And you might wonder, would anyone seriously try to beat that? At the time, no. 1 whole year would pass without anyone challenging Drunk's reign on Oach. But in the summer of 2016, Nixion returned to hunt the record again. On the leaderboards, he was still the second fastest player to ever finish the track. But that was years ago, and now he had his sights set on a much faster time. Before grinding, he had carefully practiced every checkpoint and found as consistent setups as possible for each jump, and he was ready to go up against Drunk's record. In June of 2016, Nixion reached checkpoint 11 with a new record of 11:06, and on his way there, he one-shot the wall flip on checkpoint 10. And if that wasn't enough, just like Drunk, he would also one-shot the wall, and got to checkpoint 12 in 12 minutes. The pace of this run was unheard of, but sadly, just like Drunk, the immediate adrenaline rush of one-shotting checkpoint 11 caused him to fail the last jump of checkpoint 12, and that checkpoint ended up taking him 5 minutes to pass. Nixion was losing his lead, and he needed something big in order to beat the record, and on checkpoint 16, he got just what he needed. A second try landing on the wall after the big jump, and after some clever backup strats to save his car from falling, he made his way to checkpoint 17, still 4 minutes ahead of Drunk. Once there, with surgical precision, Nixion swept through the final checkpoints, and finished with 33 minutes and 18 seconds. All things considered, an absolutely amazing run, though as Nixion said, it had the potential to go below 30 minutes. But with that, he too considered himself done on Oach. After both him and Drunk left the track behind, nobody challenged the record for a while. That's not to say the track went inactive, because many people attempted to finish it, including myself, who finished the track in about 7 hours. And I speak from experience in saying that you have to be crazy good at Trackmania if you want to beat Oach in 30 minutes.
7 hours.
3 years would
Wirtual's
pass until Oach finally had its next contender, when in 2019, the French player Nock went for the record. Nock had gained a reputation in Trackmania by finishing many extreme trial maps, and in January of 2019, he really proved his pace when he reached checkpoint 14, 1 minute ahead of Nixion. But sadly, he failed to stick the landing on the curved wall numerous times, and he couldn't get past it for over 10 minutes. What makes it even more bittersweet is that he would one-shot checkpoint 15 right after it, two-shot checkpoint 16, and within a few attempts on 17, he got to the last checkpoint, almost regaining everything that he'd lost, and he finished with a time of 37 minutes. Nock had a really interesting approach to the track, in that he tried to finish a run regardless of what happened. Even if he made mistakes early, he still didn't reset to get as consistent as possible. This all accumulated 3 days later. On this run, Nock reached checkpoint 11 in just 12 minutes, keeping up close with Nixion's pace on the first half of the map. But then, he struggled to get past the wall. After many failed attempts, when he finally reached checkpoint 12, his timer was already at 20 minutes, and he was far behind Nixion. But Nock didn't give up. He thought it was still possible with a superb second half, and in the next checkpoints, he was consistently gaining time over Nixion. Entering the final checkpoint, he was only 27 seconds behind, but crucially, Nix had fallen off one time on the single rail, and once Nock got there, he managed to keep his cool and landed on the rail first try. He got across to the quarter pipe, jumped up on the double rail, and successfully beat Nixion's record, which had stood for nearly 3 years unbeaten, with a new world record of 32:08. Many people believed that Nixion's record would stand unbeaten for much longer, including Nixion himself, who commented about Nock's run, saying, "I didn't really expect anyone to hunt this map except for Drunk. It's a bittersweet feeling, and I could say that this marks the end of my driving career, as this was without a doubt my best trial record I've ever done and could ever do." A 33-minute time on Oach is nothing to scoff at, and an accomplishment that almost all Trackmania players aren't capable of. But Nock had something special, and he clearly had the potential to go even faster, as he was eyeing out the sub 30. Considering that he lost 7 minutes on checkpoint 11, if he could get every other checkpoint decently fast, and a one-shot on checkpoint 11, that'd be enough to break the barrier. But while the maths check out on paper, actually doing it is completely different. A world record on Oach comes down to the smallest of margins, and it could take thousands of attempts to get a run that clean. Nock would play the track on and off for the next year, and in March of 2020, he finally got a run where he was breezing through the start checkpoints, reaching checkpoint 11 in just 9 minutes, the new fastest pace ever. This run had the potential to become historic, if only he landed the wall jump. For the first time on the track, Nock one-shot the checkpoint. He backed up to the safety of checkpoint 12 and found himself 10 minutes ahead of his own world record. He just had to hold this lead for 6 more checkpoints. As he got to the last checkpoint, only 25 minutes had passed, and with a clutch ending, he broke the 30-minute barrier, finishing with a time of 26:50. After all this time, Nock had beaten the world record by 5 minutes, and reached the first ever sub 30. Or well, perhaps the second ever sub 30. Considering that Nicole way back in 2012 also drove a sub 30. Just at that time it was sub 30 hours, and now Nock had done it in sub 30 minutes. really putting into perspective how far the record has come. Most people saw this as the final destination of Oach. I mean, what more was there really to achieve on the map? Well, in January of 2021, a new player had his sights set on the record. Lane, a trial player from France, ranked second on the Trackmania trials list, having finished almost all the hardest maps in the game. He wanted to beat the world record on Oach, and dedicated a lot of time and effort to the map. And you don't need to be a Trackmania expert to see that this guy was improving fast. On the 18th of January, Lane beat the map in 39 minutes, and the very next day he got a 36-minute time. Then, on the 20th of January, Lane started driving a truly mesmerizing run on Oach. After getting to checkpoint 2, he managed to do the wall jump in his second try. On checkpoint 3, he did the pipe drop on his second attempt as well. However, on the final jump before the fourth checkpoint, things almost went awry as he jumped off slightly too early, causing the car to clip the edge and land upside down. In this situation, Lane really demonstrated his car control by managing to turtle the car, literally driving upside down to cross the checkpoint line and safely respawn, a technique much more difficult than it looks. He then did checkpoint 4 on his first try, and on checkpoint 5, the tight gap jump, he passed it after just 4 respawns. On checkpoint 6, he comfortably one-shot the shortcut onto the wall, reached checkpoint 7, and did the wall ride into the landing on the subsequent wall, and one-shot that as well. This was turning into an incredible run. On checkpoint 8, he was faced with the precise driving in between poles, and somehow he did that first try as well. Checkpoint 9, the sculpture jump up to a blue wall, followed by a drop onto another blue wall, one-shot that too. On checkpoint 10, he lost about 30 seconds respawning, but once he got onto the wall, he made it to checkpoint 11 in a ridiculous 6 minutes and 34 seconds. To put that into perspective, this wasn't just the fastest human split ever, but it was also 53 seconds ahead of the track's segmented run from 2012, which showed every checkpoint done first try. But now, Lane was faced with the hardest checkpoint, and there was a lot of pressure on his shoulders. Unfortunately, on the run that could have been, he didn't one-shot checkpoint 11, and he didn't get it second try either. But on his third try, he succeeded, as he made it to checkpoint 12 in 8 minutes and 44 seconds, which still made it the fastest run ever. And Lane had a trick up his sleeve to go even faster. On checkpoint 12, where players traditionally land on the wall, turn around and climb over a small ledge backwards, Lane maintained enough speed to drive over it forwards, saving 20 seconds as opposed to turning around. When he got to checkpoint 15, he was nearly 6 minutes ahead of Knock, and with a great ending, the first ever sub 20 was within reach. But some mishaps made him struggle a little bit with landing on the pipes, and it took him 2 minutes to get past it. He was driving as calmly as he could while trying to push for the record, and as he got to the final checkpoint, he had 19 minutes on the timer. For the sub 20 dream, he needed to attempts, but once he got there, he quickly nailed the rest and finished with the amazing time 20 minutes and 33 seconds. If you were a Trackmania player watching this run 10 years ago, you probably wouldn't have believed it was real, but it was. Lane had beaten Oach, respawning only 68 times on 18 checkpoints, on a map that was built to be near impossible for humans to finish. The throne now belonged to Lane, and though most trial experts found it way too daunting to go up against it, there was still one player who, after all this time,
Nixion
wanted to beat it. Simo900.
Wait, wasn't that
The
Nixion's
fourth
partner?
player to ever finish the track, returned 9 years later to challenge the Oach world record. In those years, Simo had been playing numerous difficult trial maps, building some of the hardest tracks in the game, and honing his precision, skills, and game knowledge. He had also won the prestigious Khaki is Khaki event twice, finishing almost all the inhumanly difficult tracks in those competitions. Simo had become a true force to be reckoned with, and he was coming back for his legacy. On the 31st of March 2021, Simo beat Oach in 33 minutes and 56 seconds, getting 4th place on the leaderboards. The day after, he improved down to a 25-minute time, jumping up to 2nd place.
I was gonna say something like on this date he had this legendary run, something like that.
Just 1 hour later, in his next attempt,
this is a long run.
Achieved a 22:43.
That's a long video.
In that run, he fell behind Lane early by several minutes, but slowly managed to catch up again and overtake him at checkpoint 17. And had he managed to get onto the pipe, he could have perhaps beaten the record. Still though, his consistency was unlike anything seen before on Oach. He couldn't match Lane in the start, but he was consistently gaining time throughout the second half. Simo seemed poised to take first. He just needed one more run with a few less mistakes. Simo kept playing the track for the next days, and 1 week later, he started driving a run that for him was nothing out of the ordinary. He didn't get quite the legendary start that Lane did, but he reached checkpoint 11 in a wildly impressive 9 minutes. And to add to that, he casually one-shot the wall, as if it was nothing. Then he followed that up with an immediate one-shot of checkpoint 12, using the forward strategy. And just like that, he'd almost caught up to Lane again. He got checkpoint 13 in his 3rd attempt, and on checkpoint 14, he overtook Lane, and one-shot the jump to the curved wall. But on the last trick before reaching checkpoint 15, Simo landed upside down. He tried his best to turtle across and into the checkpoint, but he lost his momentum, and despite being less than a block away from the checkpoint, he was forced to respawn. He gathered himself as best as he could, and just 2 minutes later, he managed to get back there. But now, the only way to get the record was with a near-perfect ending. Once at 15, he crucially managed to land on the pipe first try, something that Lane had struggled with, putting him no more than a few seconds behind again. On checkpoint 16, Simo overtook the lead, where he landed the big jump in his 2nd try, where Lane took 4 attempts. And on checkpoint 17, he kept his calm and didn't fall off the pipe. He was way ahead once he got to the last checkpoint, and all that remained was clutching the last few tricks for the world record. (1924). A new world record on the track. Simo had beaten Lane by over a minute, and set the first ever sub-20 on Oach. To think that this once upon a time was the hardest Trackmania map, and that within the past 10 years, the record has gone from 30 hours to 20 minutes is remarkable. And it goes to show that you should never underestimate the determination of Trackmania players. Or now that I think about it, perhaps you should, because someone stubborn enough will come along and prove you wrong. And that's how we get to witness great accomplishments like this one. For now, that is where the record stands on Oachkatzlschwoafs on ice, and I hope that you enjoyed learning a bit about its history. Thanks for watching. These videos take a long time to research, edit, and produce, so if you liked it, then please subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with when I post more content. Also consider supporting the channel on Patreon. For $5 a month, you get early access to new videos, and if that's of interest to you,